So to answer questions on what is a brake rotor, if you ever go to a shop and they say you need new brakes and rotors, the brakes are going to be the pads right here. The rotor, this piece right here. So your wheel attaches to the rotor. So these are the lugs that stick through. These put the wheel on. So this is what your wheel attaches to, your tire and your wheel. And the brakes fit around the rotor. So the rotor is what's spinning. Brakes fit around that, and they clamp down on this to also slow your wheel down, which is attached to here. So if they say you need new rotors, then the reason is because this right here, it's gotten too thin, and so your brakes aren't going to work as well. What happens when they get too thin is they tend to warp a little bit faster, which rotors are going to warp naturally anyway, based on where your brakes are sitting or if you leave it parked for a while. But that's what it means when you need to get your rotors replaced. If you take this off and take it to a shop, it'll take a couple hours to do. It costs about 30 bucks if you want to do it yourself, and that's how I usually do it. Any kind of shop is going to upcharge you a lot for it. A full set, brakes and rotors and everything, is probably going to cost about $1,000, depending on the car. But so this is what you're talking about. If you ever, you should always check it, make sure it's thick enough. But this is one of the other things you got to measure in addition to your brakes. So another thing, if you're driving down the road and as you're driving the wheel is shaking while you're stopping, that means your rotors are warped. Probably your front rotors, not your back rotors, but that means they're warped and you need to get them turned. So if you take the rotor off, go to an auto parts store, say I want to get my rotors turned, they'll put it in a machine and they'll even it all out, and they'll tell you the minimum thickness that you have left on it. So you can turn your rotors to keep them alive longer after they've been warped, which is your brakes shaking whenever you stop. Another way to test that is to test your rotors in general. If you're going about 30 miles an hour down the road and you brake pretty hard, feel your wheel and kind of feel the brake. And if you got shaking in the brake pedal or in your wheel is probably your front brakes. If it's in the pedal, it's probably the back brakes. But shaking doesn't mean your brakes are necessarily bad. It just means your rotors need to be turned. So they need to be evened out and smoothed out. That's about rotors.